Here's what I'd love you to put in lay person's terms. Apparently you can't say layman's terms. Well, sod it, I'm going to. Maurice, I'm not the most switched on person, but I believe I'm intelligent enough to be able to see this for what it is. And for once, I'm not going to be, I don't care. If you're skint, right, and you can't afford the interest on your debts, and your government is pursuing this ideological belief that, we should achieve net zero, whatever that means, by a certain date, a majority of people don't want that. It's going to bankrupt your country. And the specifics of this approach, in this case wind farms, and this was Ofgem today confirming that who knew? Wind farms drive the cost of energy up. So we've got a government who said they're going to come down and they're going up because wind farms don't create enough and we have to import, or they create too much wind, and to turn them off or to store it costs more. Can you explain to me in layman's terms how madly stupid our politicians should be that they can't see how lunatic this is? And my second question is, why don't we just drill and use what's under our own ground to deal with the horrific financial mess we find ourselves in? Or am I missing the point?
No, I don't think you are. I think that you talked about the sort of financial crises that we're sort of about to sort of face, and it reminds me actually a lot of the period building up to sort of 1976, where again it's quite similar, where you have an outdated consensus amongst the elites and a refusal to sort of budge with it until eventually you are confronted with sort of economic and financial reality that forces you to take a different sort of position. And there are strong parallels, I think, with that period and today, and we can see that with the net zero agenda, definitely. The only other way I can sort of describe it is that it is ideological. I think for most people it's highly irrational that we are pursuing this agenda that is deindustrializing us. It's pushing up the bills of ordinary families and businesses. It's weakening our sort of geostrategic position in the world as well. We've got the return of sort of great power competition, and we're increasing our reliance not just on foreign imports of LNG, but also cheap Chinese green tech that we're importing to sort of prop up this net zero agenda. It seems high. Of course, it's irrational to sort of when you look at it through that lens. But if you take a step back and you look at it through another lens, which is that we have actually put into law that within a generation, 25 years, we are going to we're going to reach net zero emissions by 2050. It's perfectly rational. Everything else is sort of secondary to that. So, by any means necessary,
But explain that to me. You're an expert. What does that actually bloody well mean? Mike Graham asked the ultimate question, in my humble opinion, about 3 months ago. I repeated it earlier. He said, what happens when we get to net zero if we do? Do you get a medal? Do they set you a new target? What does it mean? What does it mean, man?
Well, there's a sort of a technical definition for what net zero means, and in sort of layman's terms, it means that we will be putting more carbon, that will be the carbon that we're sort of producing at that time. We'll be putting back. It will be sort of using various abatement technologies and other things, so that we're a net zero emitter basically. But you're right. I don't know what it really means in sort of in the practice. I can't sort of see the future, particularly when you've got countries like China and
who don't give a damn, and we are low down on the amount that we release. And I thought you really nailed it there in the sentence. You talked about the impact on working families and everyday tax-paying people. All I hear about, so I'm not talking to you about immigration, but all I hear about is how people from other countries have terrible times, right? I think, and I'll say it to every guest for as long as I'm here, I think the British public are at a really interesting crossroads, because I think they've had years of maybe not being switched on enough or being taken for granted or not questioning it. But times have been hard since COVID for many people, for all sorts of reasons. The food shop's more expensive, energy prices go up, law and order's seemingly down the toilet, our military, our borders are open, all those sorts of things. And I think people are more switched on. And I think that ideology, in its broadest sense, could well be in trouble. Somebody came up with a great phrase the other day, Maurice. They said to me that when the silent majority realise that their voice can be heard, any government of any persuasion is in trouble. I think that's true.
I think that is absolutely true. And I think, what people are starting to sort of wake up. I mean, you've said there about the cost of living crisis. You know, the cost of living crisis has been one of the most salient issues in British politics since the end of COVID, right? There's plenty of data out there. There's research that's been done by More in Common, which shows it has been the top issue since COVID, and hasn't really budged above 60% since then. It's higher than immigration, higher than the NHS, and certainly higher than climate change. And when we talk about that we've got an energy crisis and a cost of living crisis, we don't. It's downstream from Westminster. We have the cost of Miliband crisis, and people need to start to wake up to that this is not some sort of exogenous externally inflicted event that's sort of put on us, and we haven't got any agency to be able to get a control of this. The problems that we face are man-made. They have been made specifically in Westminster by politicians like Ed Miliband, and previously under the Conservative governments. True. We need to get on top of it. And really what it boils down to is we're not producing enough energy. We haven't been producing enough energy now for nearly 20 years. And what we have been replacing, we've been taking things like coal and gas off the grid, we've been replacing it with more expensive forms of energy. And if Ed Miliband is allowed to get away with what he is planning to do, which is to load even more renewables onto the grid and to decarbonise the grid by 95% by 2030, our analysis shows, which was conducted by a World Bank economist called Gordon Hughes, that could add an additional £25 billion of costs to the grid. And to put that into just normal layman's terms so people can understand what that means, Ofgem announced yesterday that the electricity prices will be going up to about 26p from just under that at the moment. We anticipate that assuming that Miliband's agenda goes ahead and the timelines are sort of met, that could go up to about 40p. That'd be just catastrophic for families. And that would drag in an awful lot of people.
And the words in the election campaign about working families just ring so hollow now. God.